Hello and good morning. Today we will continue to discuss chapter 2 titled as The End of Bipolarity from your NCERT textbook Contemporary World Politics. Today we are going to discuss the shock therapy in post-communist regime, consequences of shock therapy, tensions and conflict in former Soviet republics. So let's begin. The collapse of communism was followed in most of the communist countries by a painful process of transition from an authoritarian socialist system to a democratic capitalist system. The model of transition in Russia, Central Asia and East Europe that was influenced by the World Bank and the IMF, International Monetary Fund, came to be known as shock therapy. Then shock therapy varies in intensity and speed among the former Second World countries, but its direction and features were quite similar. Each of these countries was required to make a total shift to a capitalist economy, which meant rooting out completely any structures evolved during the Soviet period. Above all, it means that private ownership was to be the dominant patterns of ownerships of property. Privatization of state assets and corporate ownership patterns were to be immediately brought in. Collective farms were to be replaced by private farming and capitalism in agriculture. This transition ruled out any alternate or third way other than state-controlled socialism or capitalism. So, shock therapy involved development of free trade and allowing foreign investment, opening up of economy, deregulation and currency convertibility. Development was now envisaged through more trade, and thus sudden and complete switch to free trade was considered essential. The free trade regime and foreign direct investment were to be the main engines of change. Finally, the transition also involves a breakup of existing trade alliances among the countries of Soviet bloc. Each state from this bloc was now linked directly to the West and not to each other in the regions. This state were thus to be gradually absorbed into Western economic system. The Western capitalist state now became the leader and thus guided and controlled the development of the region through various agencies and organizations. Now let us come to the consequences of shock therapy. The economic, political, ideological and social transformation did not deliver what it was expected to deliver. So the shock therapy administered in the 1990s did not lead the people into the promised utopia of mass consumption. So it brought ruins to the economies and disaster upon the people of the entire regions. Then the industries in the regions will put up for sale. This sale is called as the largest garage sale in the history, and the industries were sold at a throwaway prices to the buyer. The value of rubles, the Russian currency, declined dramatically, and the rate of inflation was so high that people lost all their savings. The collective farm system disintegrated, leaving people without food security, and Russia started to import food. The real GDP of Russia in 1999 was below what it was in 1989. The old trading structure broke down with no alternative in its place. The old system of social welfare was systematically destroyed. The withdrawal of government subsidies pushed large sections of the people into poverty. The middle classes were pushed to the periphery of society, and the academics and intellectual manpower disintegrated or migrated. Privatizations led to new disparities. Post-Soviet states, especially Russia, were divided between rich and poor regions. Unlike the earlier system, there was now great economic inequalities between the peoples. Then the constructions of the democratic institution was not given the same attention and priority as the demand of economic transformation. The constitutions of all these countries were drafted in a hurry and hurried manner, and most, including Russia, had a strong executive president with the widest possible power that rendered elected parliament relatively weak. In Central Asia, the president had great power and several of them became very authoritarian. For example, the president of Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan appointed themselves to power first for 10 years and then extended it for another 10 years. They allowed no dissent or opposition. A judicial culture and independence of the judiciary was yet to be established in most of these countries. Most of these economies, especially Russia, started reviving in 2000, 10 years after their independence. The reasons for the revival for the most of their economies was the export of natural resources like oil, natural gas and minerals. Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, Russia, Turkmenistan and Uzbekistan are major oil and gas producers. Other countries have gained because of the oil pipeline that cross their territory for which they get rents. So most of these former Soviet republics since then were facing a lot of instability, civil war, unrest and ethnic conflict now. Now let us come to tensions and conflict. Most of the former Soviet republics were prone to conflict and many have had civil war and insurgencies. In Russia, two republics, Czechia, Dagestan, have had violent secessionist movement. Moscow method of dealing with the Chechen rebels and indiscriminate military bombing have led to many human rights violations but failed to deter the aspiration for independence. In Central Asia, Tajikistan witnessed civil war that went on for 10 years till 2001. In Azerbaijan, provinces of Nagorno-Karabakh, some local Armenians want to secede and join Armenia. In Georgia, the demand for independence had come from two provinces, resulting in the civil war. These are movements against the existing regime in Ukraine, Kazakhstan and Georgia. Countries and provinces are fighting over river water. All this had led to instability, making life difficult for the ordinary citizens. Then the Central Asian Republic are areas with vast hydrocarbon resources which have brought them economic benefits. Central Asia has also become a zone of competition between outside power and oil companies. The region is next to Russia, China, Afghanistan and Pakistan and close to West Asia. After 11 September 2001, the US wanted military bases in the regions and pay the government of all Central Asian states to hire bases and to allow airplanes to fly over their territory during the war in Afghanistan and Iraq. However, Russia considered this state as its near abroad and believed that they should be under Russian influence. China has interest here because of the oil resources and the Chinese has begun to settle around the border and conduct trade. In Eastern Europe, Czechoslovakia split peacefully into two, with the Czechs and Slovak forming independent countries. But most of severe conflict took place in the Balkan Republic of Yugoslavia. After 1991, it broke apart with several provinces like Croatia, Slovenia, Bosnia, Herzegovina declaring independence. Ethnic Serbs opposed this and massacres of non-Serb Bosnians followed. The NATO intervention and bombing of Yugoslavia followed the inter-ethnic civil wars. So that was the end of our discussion for today. In our next episode, we will be discussing India and post-communist countries. So have a great day.